Good evening everyone, welcome back to Buddy Education, and today we are going to continue with the chapter that we studied the last time, the French Revolution, chapter 1 of history. We'll recap everything, but before that I want to quickly check if I'm audible, if I'm visible, and then we'll kick off with our session yet again like a movie. So before we go ahead, let's quickly see, am I audible? Am I visible? These are the two things that we have to check. So let me just also open my own live and see whether I can hear myself or not. Okay, I think I'm able. Yes, okay, great. All right, so how are you all? How has been your day looking like? How was your weekend? I think I'm visible. I think I'm audible. Are we good to go? Shall we start? Yes. So I got an I am audible. So I think we're good to go then. All right. Yes. So let's get started with our class today. Chalo. So remember, I told you in the last class as well that French Revolution is that key chapter that changes the history of the entire world. And similarly, in the last part, I think we already studied till half of the journey of Louis XVI. So we'll just quickly recap and rewind for quickly 5 minutes, and then we'll move forward with our second part and we'll be completing the chapter today. Okay? So let's get started. Before we move ahead, remember I told you that this chapter starts with the climax, right? So what happens in the chapter is there's a climax. What is the climax? That there's a day, 14 July 1789. In that year, on that day, Louis XVI demanded its army to move around the city of Paris, right? On the other hand, 7,000 men and women were marching towards the fort of Bastille. Remember, now the key word here was when they reached Bastille, first they killed the commander, second they released all the prisoners. How many prisoners were there? 7 prisoners. And third, they decided to destroy the fort and they sold the pieces into the market as souvenirs. So these are the 3 keywords that you have to remember. And we actually understood about the complete destruction of Fort of Bastille. We saw this climax happening. But what was the real reason behind it? So we moved back in the story. Remember, I told you that in movies also, generally when you look at a movie, they tell you a climax. Whenever you go to a theater or a cinema, you look at the movie, you see a climax, and then they take you back to 10 years ago, 5 years ago to see like what happened. And similarly in this chapter also, they tell you about the climax and then they take you back to year 1774, that what actually happened that led to such a drastic event. Okay, so now what happened was, again revision time, 774. In 1774, Louis XVI was crowned as a king. He belonged to a Bourbon dynasty. He was only 20 years old. As king, he expected to be a king of luxury, but when he became the king, he found that empty treasury. And why was the treasury empty? Because of the continuous wars, the huge, humongous loan on him, the loan interest. 13 American colonies were saved by France, but the repercussion of it, the consequence of it, huge loss of money, right? So there were so many things that actually led to the reduction and the empty treasury, right? So this was one of the reasons why the king had no money when he became the king, right? So second of that, we understood about 3 types of estates in France. What were the 3 estates, students? If you could quickly remember the 3 estates. The first estate was the clergy, that is the priest. The second estate were the nobility, king's closest family and friends. And the third estate were all the other people that also included middle class people, that is teachers, doctors, lawyers, and then it also included poor peasants, laborers, etc., right? And remember, I told you that the taxes were only paid by the third estate. And they paid to which estate? They paid to first and second estate. Another add-on in the climax. So guys, a war never happens because of a one-day reason. A climax never happens because of a day reason. A climax always happens when things emerge one after another, right? So the water is rising, and once it comes above the sea level, that's when you know things are gone bad, right? So exactly this happened. Now the second thing was that the king had no money. So king thought, let's increase some taxes. But before he could increase the taxes, there was another event that we studied in the class last time, was a subsistence crisis. Do you remember the subsistence crisis? I told you there was a rise in population. When there's a rise in population, there's a rise in demand for food. When there's a rise in demand for food, the food grains are not enough. When the food grains are not enough, the prices increase. But the prices increase, the salary does not increase. So when the salary does not increase, people cannot afford to pay for such a thing, right? So when they cannot afford, they start fighting. When they start fighting and when they do not get food, they end up getting diseases or eventually die. And this was the complete drastic event that took place in France. And this was another reason of why it added up to the climax that happened. Another reason was that the king actually, do you remember I also told you that Louis XVI called off a meeting, and he called a meeting where all the three estates came to vote whether we should increase the taxes or not. So the first estate said yes, because they don't have to pay the taxes, right? The second estate also said yes, because they also don't have to pay the taxes. The third estate said no, because they were the ones who had to pay the taxes. But the king, do you think the king heard them? No, the king did not hear them. Why? Because majority wins. The first estate, the second estate, they both said that we want to increase the taxes because that's how we're going to get money in France. But the third estate was not very happy with it. That is why they decided to get up and walk up from the meeting. And when they walked off from the meeting, they decided to go to a tennis court. And they were led by two senior leaders, Mirabeau and Abbassias. So these two people helped them that you should protest against the king should listen to you, but the king did not listen to them. But when the king did not listen to them, they decided to bring on that climax that we studied in the part 1 of the class. What was that climax? That they all went to the Bastille fort and decided to kill the commander and release the prisoners. So that is why the climax happened. I hope the chapter till here is clear. I'll just quickly look at the chat and see if everything is still going good. And then we're going to go, hi, good evening everyone. And then we're going to go to start our class for today. Okay? Hello, hi everyone. Cool. I think we're good to go with the chapter, right? Let's get started. So now we've understood, we've revised whatever happened in the last class. Now, this was the episode of the Paris city. I remember, students, I told you in the third estate, there were people belonging to upper middle class, such as teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, right? So they were the people who lived in the city. So the fort of Bastille event, the Bastille attack, took place in the city. But I also told you that the third estate also consisted of people belonging to landless laborers. They were poor peasants, they were artisans. They actually lived where? They actually lived in the countryside. So on the other hand, even in the village area, in the countryside area, there were constant protests going on against the king. So let's see what was the constant fight that was happening against the king in the village area, right? So now we are saying that king ordered troops to move into the Paris. We saw the 14 July event. Everybody understood that. I think that part is completely clear. But what happened in the other side of the city? Other side of the city, all the countryside people decided to go to their landlord's house and destroy those houses. And those landlords came to be known as manor. So you have to understand this word. This word is in your CBSE NCERT books, which is that they decided to destroy the houses of manor. A manor is a person who owns large estates. So he's the head of that large lands. Okay? So this happened. So there were two types of climax that were taking place on 14 July. One in the city, the fort of Bastille, and the other on the countryside, where they decided to go to the landlords' houses and destroy those houses, right? At this point, all the people belonging to third estate came to be known as the National Assembly. Why am I stressing on this word is because you have to remember the National Assembly comes out as the most prominent part of the country in whole of Europe. So in Europe, the complete idea of having a government was changed after this episode. Why? Because now National Assembly came out to be a very strong force amongst the people. Okay? So I hope yahan tak, till here it is clear, right? Let's go forward. Now, what will king do? So now king got really angry, but king got really scared as well. King was like, I never expected that third estate would revolt like this. But what do you think could be the reason? Remember in the last class I told you that there was John Locke, there was Rousseau, there was Montesquieu who were trying to impart knowledge amongst these people. So your horizons, I'll tell you, this is relevant for a chapter and also relevant in your life. So you only have the power to think when you read. You only have the power to question when you understand. Alright, so whenever you read a book, let's say you read two types of books belonging to same category. Let's talk about money. On money, you read two types of book. On finance, you read two types of book. I read a book A and I read a book B. And both the books tell me different definitions of saving money, different definitions on finances. Now, when I will have two books giving me two types of opinions, my horizon, my perspectives will change. My horizon will broaden. Why will my horizon broaden? Because now I have the ability to think. Now I have the ability to question. Now I have the ability to make opinions about something. And now I have options to decide what is right and what is wrong. But if I'm not given with any choice, if I'm not given any option, my horizon will be always limited. For example, growing up, if nobody will teach me how to stand up and walk, I will never be able to walk. If my parents will never teach me to go to school, I will never understand the importance of school. So you only understand, you only have the power to think, to question, to make a choice is when you're given a choice. If you don't have a choice, you will never have the option to think and question, right? So similarly, here, the third estate people did not have the ability to think. Why? Because they were never given that kind of option and choices. Louis XVI made sure there were always three estates. Louis XVI and other kings always made sure that the third estate had to pay their taxes. So now the third estate, when people were born in the third estate, they automatically knew that we are born to pay the taxes. But people like John Locke, people like Rousseau, people like Montesquieu told them that no. Why? Why do you have to pay? Why can't the wealthier people pay? That's when third estate people started to rethink everything. That's when the third estate people started to question everything. And that's why the episode of Bastille on 14 July actually came out to be a true lesson. Okay? Alright, so this is relevant for a chapter. This is relevant for your life as well. Moving forward, now here, Louis XVI finally accepted the National Assembly. Louis XVI finally understood that now Louis XVI will have to give importance to third estate as well. So now National Assembly actually became a huge important party in the whole of France. And now we'll see a little structure here. Do you see this picture right in front of me? Now what happened was, earlier there was only one person, king. King had the sole right to make the decision. King had the only power to make any decision, to take any order, to give any order, right? But after the Bastille episode, the France was a monarchy. What is a monarchy? When there's a king rule and when the king dies, his son becomes the next king and then his son becomes the next king and so on. This is how a monarchical structure works. But now the third estate also wanted the equal importance and now third estate also came into the role. So now France here becomes from monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. So this is the first part of the chapter where the government actually changes. So now this is the key part that you have to remember. What is the key part that always remember in question in exam time? It always comes that how France became a constitutional monarchy from a monarchy. So that episode of Bastille actually led to change of government. Okay? So now France officially becomes what? A constitutional monarchy. Now what do you mean by constitutional monarchy? Where a king is there. We are not removing the king. We are not slipping away the king. The king is there. But now the king will have to also look at the people who are going to give him suggestions and advices. and these are the people belonging from third estate. But here's the catch. Not all the third estate people were given the right to make a decision. Of course, remember in the last class I told you about active and passive citizens. So the active citizens are basically people who are above the age of 25, okay, are male, okay, are earning well, okay, and have property. If these four conditions are met, you're an active citizen. But if you're a man under 25, if you're a woman, a child, or an elder person, you are not. Or if you're above 25, a male, but do not earn well. Or if you're above 25 and male, but do not have land or property, you are still a passive citizen. So now when we talk about active and passive citizens, on the third estate, they were about how many people? Active citizens entitled to vote. Out of 28 million people, 4 million people were only active. Now these 4 million people decide to elect 50,000 people, and those 50,000 people elect 745 members, right? So now those 745 members plus the king, they together become a government, and this government of people and king came to be known as constitutional monarchy. I hope this part got clear to you, right? So now we have seen the first change in government, that France becomes a constitutional monarchy from a monarchy. Clear? Let's go forward. Now what happens is, now they were a constitutional monarchy, so they'll make a constitution. So now what does the constitution means? Now they will have some rights, they will have some rules. So you have to understand rights to life, freedom, opinion, equality, they all belonged to all the human and are given to people by birth. Remember in the last class, if you've seen my last class, and if you've not seen, go back and see it again, okay? So if you've seen the last class, you must have seen that I told you that the ideas and ideologies such as liberty, fraternity, equality, all these ideas have arrived from country of France. And since then, it has been spread to other countries, right? So these are such few rights that were encompassed and brought out in the world, that these are the rights that cannot be taken away from people and they are given to them by birth. Okay? Chalo, moving forward. Now, do you think the king will be satisfied that earlier king was the only sole person making decisions and now the king will have to hear to 745 members? Imagine you're the monitor of your class, you're the leader of the class, and you've been leader since many years, but suddenly one day anybody comes up and tell you now you have to have 5 more people in your team, and those 5 more people will also take decisions with you. Will you like it? Not really. You might not adjust with that fact that earlier, since last so many years, I've been the sole leader, but now suddenly there are 5 people along with me. What? Not possible, right? So similarly here the king accepted the crisis, but from inside the king was like, I'm not very happy. This is now how my country will work. This is not how it is. I will not hear to 745 people giving me opinions, suggestions and advices. So now the king had to take a step. What did king do? King decided to take help from its neighbors. So now you'll see here, there was a neighbor of France, Prussia. Prussia and France decided to collaborate. Louis XVI went to Prussian king and said, see, I met with a fate like this. Next day, what if you also meet with the same fate? What if Prussian community also gets inspired with the French community? What if the people from Prussia get inspired from the third estate people of France? Then you will also have to meet with the similar fate like I've met. So now the king of Prussia actually thought about it, that maybe I'll also become a constitutional monarchy, and if things will go bad like this, then I don't want to be a part of it. So France, basically the Louis XVI decided that let's attack the third estate people, let's join the forces and bring back the monarchy again. We are not going to work with the constitutional monarchy. Let's bring back the old form of monarchy again, where king is the only person making and deciding for its citizens. But here the destiny changes. I know Louis XVI had some really bad luck. Why? Because the people got to know that King of France, Louis XVI, is into some secret alliance with the Prussian king. And when the citizens of France got to know about this, they decided that enough is enough. We're waging a war now. Enough is enough. We've attacked the Bastille Fort. We have done a lot of protests. There are people from countryside actually protesting against the king. But the king is extremely a shrewd man. He's constantly attacking its own citizens like this. So all the people decided finally that this is the last saturation point that we gave chance to Louis XVI. Now we're gonna engage into a war and we'll make sure Louis XVI does not remain the king. So what happened was, National Assembly decided to collect itself and decided to wage a war against Louis XVI. Now, when they were actually waging a war, they made a patriotic song, which is even a patriotic song of France even today. What was the name of the song? Marseille. The spelling is Marcellus, but when we pronounce it, we call it Marseille, okay? Now, who was it composed by? Roger de Isle, okay? These are the two facts that you'll have to remember, students. It always in MCQ, this question arrives and this question comes a lot. So, Marseille is the patriotic song written and composed by Roger de Isle, and Marseille is now the national anthem of France as well. So, you have to remember this. So, slowly, even women joined this war and everybody came against the king that now we really do not want the king anymore. So now political clubs actually became an important point. There were rallies, there were people coming and engaging that we don't want Louis XVI at all. So now what happens is, if you've seen, there are small patches of coffee shops. Now all the people started to meet at those coffee shops and they used to discuss all day about what all they can do for their country, how they can kick out Louis XVI from their country, what all can he do to stop a war with Prussia. So there were political clubs making a different spaces. They were all the people from villages were coming. Women were taking time out of their homework from the domestic chores, and then they decided to come and actually sit down and conversate between people that how can they actually contribute against the king, okay? So as you can see, this included small shopkeepers, there were shoemakers, there were servants, there were daily wage workers. These were all the people that were deciding to come up together against Louis XVI. In fact, they got such patriotism in them that they decided to make a uniform for themselves. And those uniforms came to be known as sans-culottes. Now you have to understand what does this mean. Generally, people from Europe wore those. Have you heard of that word capris? When I used to be a little girl, I used to wear a lot of capris. So they were like till knees, okay? Those pants, half pants, these are till knees, yes, I remember the word now. So there were, in earlier days, there were people who used to wear half pants and a jacket type of sort. This was the uniform for people of Europe. Now, these people wanted to separate themselves from those, so they decided to make full pants. And those full pants, half pants are called culottes, okay? And sans word means without that. So basically, sans culottes, we will wear full pants, okay? So now this was said to themselves apart from the fashionable section of society, especially nobles who wore knee breeches. What do you mean by knee breeches? They were pants till knee, only till knee. Now these people who were belonging to the third estate and who were waging a war against Louis XVI, they made their own uniform which were till feet. Okay, yeah. So this is how they actually changed. Now what happened was, small clubs came to be in picture of whole of France. And amongst those clubs, one of the most famous club was the Jacobin clubs by Saint Jacob, okay? So Saint Jacob was a person who actually pushed these people a lot, and Jacobin club became to be one of the most famous point where people used to meet a lot and discuss about the adverse conditions they're suffering from. So now what happens is, the Bastille attack took place in what time? July. Now after July, we've reached to what month? We've reached in August. Now in August, what happened was, they were tired of Louis XVI and their actions. So decided to go to the main fort. So they stormed the palace of Tuileries. Tuileries was the palace where king lived, okay? And they decided to massacre king guards. Again, massacre means they decided to attack on the king guards, and they decided to hold the king and kidnap him. So what did they do? They actually kidnapped the king, and from now on the assembly voted to imprison the royal family. So the National Assembly finally decided that pick this group up, put them in the jail and then we'll take a nice like this, okay? So from now on, the age also changed for male. So earlier it was 25, now it became 21. So there were another change, another significant change that came to happen, that actually happened in France, was the age of voting for males. We're still not giving any right to vote to women community. Not yet. It's going to happen really late. But till here, at least all the males above 25 now could vote. Okay. So now, after August, we've reached to next timeline. Also, students, I will also be making a video soon on just a 10 minutes video, or let's say a 15 minutes video on just the timeline of it. So we'll put up a timeline and then I'll tell you the event. This way you can make a one-pager note. And when you have a one-pager note, you can actually use that one-pager note for your examination. You don't have to go to the whole chapter. You can just take the events, the dates, and then the events right in front of it. So we'll make a video on that as well, okay? So on 21st September, what actually happens is, even the constitutional monarchy is now changed, and now France becomes a republic. So let's reiterate whatever we have learned. Let's rewind whatever we have learned. Earlier, France was monarchy, which means it had a king, Louis XVI, and had 3 estates. After that, France became a constitutional monarchy. Now they had a king, but 745 other members called as National Assembly. King, National Assembly, constitutional monarchy. Now, next government, no king, only National Assembly. So now the National Assembly came to be known as a republic. Now, what do you mean by republic? A republic is where you elect a king, elect a person to rule above you. He is not selected, he is not directly appointed, but it is done through voting. So now France sees another form of government, which is a republic form of government. Now students, you have to understand that France in that era was the only country that saw so many changes in the form of government, like many changes. Right now we'll see another change as well. Very quickly it's coming. Okay, so republic is a form of government where people elect the government, including the head of government. So there is no monarchy anymore. Now they'll choose a person, whoever they want to make the leader, okay? We are waiting to see who becomes the leader now, right? Alright, before we go forward with what happened to king, I'll just quickly see if everything is good to go in the class. Just let me have a look here, because I want to make sure if I'm audible. Somebody is asking if this chapter is going to come in the exam. Yes, it is one of the most important chapter that is going to come in the class. I think we're good to go, right? Yes, we're good to go. I'm looking at the chat from here as well. Okay, so now what happens to the king? King was publicly executed through a machine called the guillotine machine. I'll tell you how it is and how does it work. So he was executed publicly. Now you have to remember this fact, where Palace de la Concorde, you have to remember this. Queen Marie Antoinette met with the same fate. Queen Marie Antoinette was Louis XVI's wife, and people did not want to take any chance that if the king has done this, maybe later, what if another episode takes place, what if his wife also gets involved in some of the war like this? So no, not taking any chance, right? So what was guillotine? Now you have to understand who was their leader. So their leader came to be known as Maximilien Robespierre. Now you have to understand where this person is coming from. No, the person was there all the time when the political clubs were happening, when there were wars happening, when there was kidnapping happening. The back-end support was given by Robespierre, and actually people were very inspired by the actions of Maximilien Robespierre. Why? Because people thought that he is that person who saved us from the king. He is the person who's actually saving us from all the bad activities done by the king. So they decided that why not we make Maximilian as our head of the party, or maybe head of the government, because anyhow they have to choose a person, anyhow they have to elect the person. So they decided to elect Maximilien Robespierre. But as soon as Maximilien Robespierre became the head became the ruler of the government. He flipped. And that is why this era, this time period, 1793-94 wala time period, came to be known as the reign of terror. Reign means the time of terror, very scary. I'll tell you why. Now what happened was, Maximilian was completely against first and second estate. Good for us, good for third estate. Third estate were also against. Now what did he do? He took away all the land from the church people, that is the clergy, and decided to distribute in third estate. Till here also it sounds really good. I mean, this is what the fight is all about, right? 10% people, 40% people are living in such huge lands, right? So technically it's good. It's a good one. It's a good deal. Now what happened was, all those who did not listen to him were either arrested, were either imprisoned, were charged with hefty fines, or were even guillotined. So guys, the reign of terror here means he acted like a boss, where he could literally chop off people's head if they won't listen to him. So exactly this is how a guillotine machine looks like. This is how a guillotine machine looks like, is made by Dr. Guillotine. Now what happens, do you see her small circle here? You put the body like this, you put the head, the neck here, and the neck gets cut like this. Yes, it's extremely dreadful, very painful. Let's not talk about pain here. The person dies within seconds. So this is what Maximilian actually used for other people as well. So whoever was against Maximilian, he was either put in the jail or were guillotined like this. So what other things did he do? He decided to, he forced meat and bread were rationed. I mean, if there is a proper supply of, if there is no proper supply, he never bothered about it. Let's say 1 year, there's enough food grains. So the prices will be nominal. One day there is not enough food grains, the prices still remained the same. So Maximilian was like, I don't care about. I absolutely am unbothered about your salaries. The prices of bread, the prices of meat, which is their staple food, will always remain fixed. So he fixed the prices. The first problem amongst the third estate people was this. The second problem were churches were shut down. Completely the buildings were changed into offices and barracks. Barracks where the army person live, the battalion areas, right? And later he used white flour was forbidden. I mean, even if you have the money, you cannot buy luxury food at all. So this is something that actually bothered people, that now the freedom is the cost of that freedom, where first and second estate people are not enjoying their privileges, the cost was very high. Now, all the citizens were required only this one kind of bread, the equality bread. You can't eat white flour. I mean, let's say I have money, I want to have a luxury appetite, luxury food. No, you can't have it. So now all these things led to actually Maximilian's downfall, because people were again irritated. People were like, if we can remove Louis XVI, we can remove Maximilian Robespierre as well. So they were very agitated with his rule, with his ideas, with his mindset, with his authoritative nature, with his dictatorship, and they decided that we do not want Maximilian Robespierre at all. Please spare him away. So that is why there was a complete disaster. Maximilian Robespierre was executed as well. Maximilian Robespierre met with the same fate. He was guillotined. Yes, my students, he was also guillotined by the citizens of France. Now what? There's no government again. Before we go forward with this slide, tell me students, what have we learned till here? We've understood that there was a monarchy in France. Then we've understood there was a constitutional monarchy. Then we understood after constitutional monarchy, it became a republic where Maximilian took over. And now there is no Maximilian as well. So now what will happen? Now people were like, it's always bad to appoint one person to head over them. Let's have multiple people taking decisions for us. This way, everyone will be balanced and checked. Makes sense, right? Earlier, only one person is taking the decisions. It could go wrong, it could go right, but only one person is taking the decisions. But now what happened was, if we have 4 or 5 people in a group, there is always a balance and check going on. That now, if one person is taking a decision or one person is becoming bossy, other 4 can humble them down. Other 4 can humble that person down, right? So this is what the people of France decided, that let's not have one person like Louis XVI, let's not have one person like Maximilian, let's have a group of people. And that is where a directory is formed. Now, directory were the people from wealthier middle class. They decided that let's appoint good people and they'll take decisions for us. And now there is a change in government of France again. So now we have a directory. Now let's see. Fall of Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle class to take over. Understood already. Now what happened was appointed directory of how many members here? 5 members. Okay. So directors often clashed with councils who then sought to dismiss them. Now what happened was these 5 people were always under the discussion that we should be doing this for France, we should not be doing this for France, but there was always a system of checks and balances. But then what goes wrong? There's another thing that goes wrong, and that is political instability of directory made a way for Napoleon Bonaparte. Now I want to check out the chat quickly and want to see. Have you heard of Napoleon Bonaparte? If yes, you have to put down the answer. Yes or no, you have to comment, and I have to quickly check whether you actually know about that person or not. Hi Yashika, long time I'm seeing you here. Thank you everyone. Okay. Yes. Good. All right. Let's go forward. So now Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the person from the directory. So he was one person out of the 5 members. Now, what happened was out of the 5 members, he was the strongest one. Actually, he had a past of military as well. So his mind always worked that how he can occupy other territories, how can he save himself from a war, how can he start a war, how can he absorb another territories into his country. So he was always smart militarily. Now what happened was there was a constant fight and discussions between those 5 people. And out of those 5 people, Napoleon became the smarter one and decided to become a dictator on his own. So he became more powerful, took people's support, and became the only sole dictator of France. So now you see another form of government. So now we have dictatorship going on in France. We started with monarchy, we now have a dictatorship. And dictatorship was the rule under what? Under Napoleon Bonaparte, right? So let's see, while we were talking about wars, while we were talking about giving powers to male, giving voting rights to male members of the community, talking about taxes, talking about revolution, talking about Maximilian, did women have a revolution? Yes. Earlier, what happened was women were not allowed to step out of their houses. Most women did not have education access. Most women were not allowed to actually study or go to school. Most women were married off really early. Most women, there were many, even women could not go for a divorce if they were in a bad or let's say an abusive marriage. But later, when the revolutions were taking place, when there were Jacobin clubs were forming, there were around 60 clubs that were women oriented. So we do see a change in lives of women of France when these changes in government were taking place. So it's an important question that you have to remember, that now what happened was even women demanded the right to vote. However, they got the right to vote in 1946. Can you imagine? The fight here is going in 1789. And they get the voting rights in 1946. I mean, the year, the fight was really long but worthy, right? So now what happens was fathers could no longer force women into marriage. The rules changed. Even marriage was made into a contract that they can come out of it if it's an abusive one. That got changed. Divorce made legal. Women could now train for jobs. Women now can step out for jobs. Even now, women can go out and study full time, right? During the Reign of Terror, the new government issued a law ordering closure of women's club. So Maximilian Robespierre was not at all in support of women. In fact, there's a story of a woman. I think it's in the next page here. Yeah. So you have to remember this woman. This woman's name is Olympiads. Now, what is her story? So you don't have to go through the whole thing. The easy story here is she was a brave woman. She was completely against the rule of Maximilian. And Maximilian Robespierre was that man who was completely against having political clubs for women, were completely against the divorces, were completely not in favor to give any jobs to women. He wanted women to be sitting at home at all times, to be doing only domestic work, to take care of the child, to take care of the family, and not step out at all. But this lady actually brought out a revolution, that she made a constitution that involved rights of a charter of man and woman. Earlier it was rights of a charter of only man. She was the lady who actually changed the idea. She was like, even women should have equal rights. But did Maximilian hear her? No. And she was executed. Can you imagine? Here he was charged with treason. What do you mean by treason? Have you heard of the word treason? That you do not belong, you are not a nationalist, you do not belong to your own country. You actually do fraud for your country. Somebody is charged with treason. And soon after, she was executed. So now can you imagine? She was a brave lady who knew the consequences, who knew the repercussions of things that she could face, because she was taking a brave step under whose reign even wealthy rich people were very scared of Maximilian. Imagine, this woman taking up charge must have had a lot of courage, right? All right, let's go forward. Now what happened was, slowly things got changed. Slowly people starting studying more. Slowly there were declaration of rights. Slowly newspaper, pamphlets, books, printed pictures flooded in the market about the revolution. And slowly there were plays, there were songs going out, there was awareness kicking in, there were people trying to educate other people about, hey, we even do not want Napoleon Bonaparte. Hey, we are a country who will not take up any person at all who is going to put up that kind of adverse rule upon us. So slowly things got changed. Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself. Now imagine the audacity of that person. When he thought that he has a little power, when he thought he is militarily very strong, he decided to take over France and became a dictator of his own. Let me just quickly check the chat that if I'm audible, because I suddenly feel that, oh, yes, I'm audible, yes. All right. So now what happened was, when he became crowned, he crowned himself on his own. Okay, now he's crowned himself. Let's see what he do. So now he introduced many laws such as protection of private property. Now he told that anybody, see how opposite he is of Maximilian. Maximilian took away all the property from church, and Napoleon is like, no. Whoever has property can save his property. So completely opposite. Uniform weights and measures. Now what he did was, earlier in the whole of Europe and within France also, if you move from one city to another, there was a change in weights. There was a change in currency. One thing Napoleon did was really good here. He ordered that everywhere the weights and currency should be uniform, so that it could save people from giving maybe more taxes, maybe more money. So now Napoleon here should be given applauded that he did one thing good, that he introduced uniform weights and measures. That's a really good thing. And you will study more about this in class 10, because the chapter gets over with the end of Napoleon. But what did Napoleon do? How did he lose a war? What did he do next? All these parts are in your class 10. Alright, finally he waged a war in 1815, and that is when he got defeated, and his reign, his era was over. So it did not last long. It started in 1804 and it ended in 1815. So what happened during this time? How did he lose a war? What all things did he do to upset people? What all good things? What all bad things? All these things you will study in class 10. I'm not going to barge you in with a lot of information here, because you're going to study about this in class 10. So, but if you want to know, we can make a separate video on that, okay? All right. Let's go forward. So, important part. Initially, many people saw Napoleon as a liberator. They thought that Napoleon is here to actually make good changes. But again, as Maximilian was also seen as a good person, later he showed his true colors. Napoleon actually also showed his true colors. Alright, moving forward. So now slowly, people started understanding the ideas and importance of liberty, the importance of freedom. They started questioning everything that were against the ideas of freedom. And even Tipu Sultan and Raja Ram Mohan Roy, if you've heard about them for Indian nationalism and fight in India, you'll see that they also advocate such kind of ideologies. So basically, now that we are coming to the end of the chapter, we have understood that how actual में France is that country who propagated, who inspired other countries to be free from such adverse rules, to be able to be equal to other people, to be able to enjoy that freedom, to be able to live like brothers and sisters, like family, and to understand that power is in the hands, the real power is in the hands of the people and not that one person. So here we come to the end of the chapter, where what did we see? We're going to just quickly revise and revamp everything, revise everything, that how do we see this chapter? We see this chapter as a change of government, but we also see this chapter that how the government kept changing until the people were actually satisfied. Now here I'm just going to drop a question, that you've seen the end of Napoleon here, which means France again does not have a leader. Now you will comment down in the video that who do you think will take over France again? I mean, this is something very interesting. Please don't Google. Please don't go on the Google and see who ruled after Napoleon in France. No, think who could be that person or that group of people, or what kind of government will be formed in France after the end of Napoleon Bonaparte. This is your homework, okay? But yes, we saw change of governments, but we also saw that the changes were happening until the citizens of that country were not satisfied, until they did not feel the equality amongst them, they did not feel the freedom, they did not feel liberated. Till the time they did not feel all these things, they kept improving. And this is what we should learn from France, that revolution occurs with time. Revolution is a continuous change that keeps happening until the citizens of that country are happy, absolutely satisfied with their government. So we come to the end of the chapter. We will be taking up another chapter in the next class. Till then, I want you to study hard. Wish you all the best for your exams. Wish you all the best if you're giving any test in your school. And if you want more videos, any particular topics, please make sure to comment down below and I will cater to all those videos. Till then, good night. Bye-bye.